is that which existed before time. When the words of a story lose their meaning, when actions cease to have purpose. Know that only faith can protect you from this peril. Here, in the Garden of Worlds.
So true, Elohim. Anyway, hey, and welcome back to Talos Principle. Last time we kind of finished this area except for the last little secret in here. I don't know where it is. I'm just gonna leave it for now. I'm going to return to certain areas in the future anyway, so I don't really worry about that. There's like still this door that I don't get. I only figured out that this is obviously related to the original in some way, just because it's like the date of release. It released like in mid-December, and that's kind of it. Did I actually try to go to the other side afterwards? You know what? Quick excursion. I'm gonna quickly go back around and try to reach that place. I'm just gonna jump cut to there. Huh. Like, I just wanted to check here, because obviously we've never been in this room, but there's a ladder, so they kind of expected that you can glitch out somewhat. I'm not sure if, like, maybe in the other one there might be the summer. I'm just gonna, you know, run around that. But, like, the main reason why I'm coming out here is obviously because we can see the other side of the entrance. Let me just quickly check in here. We also have, like, a ladder in there, but it doesn't seem like there is a star that I could pick up. Well, alas, it's apparently not here what I'm looking for. I'm like really not sure where that star would be. It might be related to the door. And I'm still sorry about the static. I can't really do anything against that. Like, the audio I can obviously tone down a little bit, but like the static otherwise obviously doesn't work. Wait, I wanted to go around a little bit further. I'm also kind of curious about like certain worlds sometimes, like this for example, right? Like, you can stand here and then look outside, but why is this place so important that you let me look outside? Right? I feel like a lot of these decisions probably have some sort of meaning that I'm just kind of missing. And there still isn't anything here, yeah. Obviously. And this is the other side of the entrance. It's like completely blocked with sand. I don't know if I can interact with something here, maybe to open the door and like the sand is going to fall through. Something like it. I mean, otherwise it's just like a neat place. Maybe you could technically leave, because I'm gonna just get returned, right? Yeah. Okay, I guess this is it. I just wanted to check like the other side, because I didn't do that last time. And then I guess it's just time to return to where we started in the temple. As always, there are probably still some areas left here. I looked at the percentage of the game and we were like almost 60% through like the regular symbols and like 40% through the stars. So we are about halfway at this point, and I'm like 13-ish hours in, which seems like reasonable. Like, I feel like the text said like 20 hours for like a regular playthrough, so I would expect as much. Anyway, we have something to read here probably. We still have a friend to contact, because now the communications portal should be working sometimes. Oh. This is a little bit greener than the rest. Neat. Ooh, beeping. Gonna ignore you for a second. I just wanna look around if there's like anything really cool. This more reminds me like of the first area because of all the water, obviously. I mean, there's so much water around, right? Like, it's been some time since we've seen something like it. Can I reach that place, or am I gonna drown? I can go underwater. Not far enough, okay. Just wanted to see. Okay, so I guess this doesn't really work like that. I still like to explore like new areas each time. There's something on there. Seems to be one of those audiobooks. I just don't know how to get on top. I'm guessing there's going to be like a fan that's going to fling me. Oh, on top of the monument as well? Wait a second, we do have another upgrade soon, right? Like, we have the... It looks like kind of a grapple thing? Like, I can probably hold on to like the ceiling or something like that, it looks like it. Maybe that's going to help me. Oh wait, this looked like a shovel for a second. I was so confused because of the perspective, but no, it's just like a broken sign. Well, am I gonna read? I guess I'm gonna read. We can explore in a second. I'm just curious about like all the stuff that happens, and especially the eye, you know? connecting nothing new. Osiris 7? We had Osiris 6 in the previous one, right? Coming soon? And Block 24 alive. Coming soon is kind of ominous, especially because we're still talking about like some sort of extinction level event, right? So, but let's just go in order. As always, anything to translate? Not really, I do like that. So you can at least figure out like what it's about like during the episode instead of like afterwards. Tell me of the fearsome demons of the Duat, the dying man said to the wise scribe. Though their terrible forms are loathsome to behold, they are not evil, for they are the servants of the gods. Truly, they are the blessed doorkeepers and guardians of the holy path. Their charge is to judge whether we are worthy to pass the gates that lead to Aru, and so they challenge us with riddles or in combat. Is this true of all the beings that live in the Duat? Some say that it is not so, that there are ancient gods whose names have been forgotten. I'm sorry, it's late. And spirits of darkness whose name none have ever known, and that must be avoided at all costs. But others say that these too serve a greater purpose in the ways that Osiris has not revealed to us. And what of the hidden paths that are taken by, when the, I don't know, probably a swear word. That's a good question. I mean, yeah, like if you assume there to be like all-powerful gods in this case, right? Because in their mythology, obviously, there are like multiple gods. You would assume that they can also create like all their beings or like control the other ones, unless they are also all-powerful, which also is like kind of, you know, a paradox of sorts, because of like you have two all-powerful beings, then they probably can't affect each other, which means that they are not all-powerful. But that's like unrelated to this one. It's just interesting to learn about Duat. Anyway, coming soon, EML. From Rob McLean, Institute for Applied Neuromatics. To Mom, coming soon, your son in 3D. Ooh, I hope in like those red and blue glasses. No wait, it's red and blue, not red and green, right? Like why am I thinking about that? It's been so long since I've seen those like you know, fancy old 3D glasses. Anyway. Hi Mom, I promise I'll be home soon. Maybe a couple of weeks? I know, but what we're doing here is important, and the team needs my help. I'm not going to wait until it's too late, I promise. But there's so much work we have to set up, so much that has to work for a very, very long time. I'm going to talk about this in a second. Besides, I've always wanted to work on one of these supercomputers, and believe me, EL, so it was extended lifespan, right? Yeah. It's pretty much the best there is. And the team, Mom, it's like I'm working with rock stars and mad geniuses. Except nobody's heard of them outside of science journals, of course. But Dad would be totally geeking out if he knew. Maybe I can tell him about it soon, huh? Love, Rob. Okay. Interesting. First of all, why can't you tell your dad? Is it more in the sense that he's there, like your dad is dead and you might join him soon? Something like that. And being positive about it, or maybe you just can't contact him. I do remember that they talked about how the internet was kind of, you know, breaking down. Next thing is we do have like a time span, because they were talking about like a few weeks. Wait. When did we get that one? I feel like this one doesn't have a date, like if I look at the second row here. Which is annoying, because we do know about like the time when like the entire team basically, or like parts of the team died. Which means that we have a time span. And if you say like a couple of weeks and you're still sure that you're going to be alive at that point, maybe it wasn't, like, to be fair, it can't have been like too quick, like this whole issue that they are having, just because they are working on like big projects, right? Like normally it would take many years to accomplish something like that, so it would have still been like a very slow event apparently. So not sure what exactly they are talking about. Anyway, definitely interesting to see. Wait, this was, yeah, like year 0. I'm guessing this is just an error, because year 0 doesn't really make sense. Otherwise, Block 24 alive. I hope it's not like another health block. What is the point of being alive? I know. It's an old question and not one that's easy to answer. But I mean, if you're reading this, you are alive. You could argue, yeah, sure. But I mean, if you're reading this, you are alive. And someday you will stop being alive. Both of these facts are incontrovertible. Okay, that's the way to express that. So what about it then? Don't you wonder? Do you just want to go from not existing to not existing again without even considering why? You right now, as you sit there reading this, why do you exist? What is the purpose of your life? Do you have one? Should you have one? Is it better to have a purpose or not? When you approach death, will you feel that your life had meaning? If so, why? If not, why not? What defines whether a life was good or not? It may seem abstract right now, but that moment just before death will come. It is inevitable. If you don't ask yourself these questions, how will you face that moment? I mean, those are absolutely age-old questions that have been asked by philosophers ever since thinking was a thing, apparently. So, obviously there are no clear answers, right? They have still been debating about that for many, I guess, millennia at this point. That's actually something I thought about while, like my regular shower thoughts that I have every morning about this game. There was this time where I talked about with like wasn't a serpent, like I always call him the serpent, like I always talk about the serpent in the machine, but I say obviously, I don't want to say obviously. There seem to be like multiple personalities in there, and there seem to be some that are like more aggressive asking weird questions, like comparative to like the help system, for example, right? We had the other a terminal in one of the garden areas. It was like one of the later ones in there. You know, one that we had to jump over a wall to reach, for example. And I have been... That's actually not... Why am I talking about that? I just want to say, like, there seem to be, like, multiple personalities still, which is why even though I call them, like, the serpents in the machine, I just like that because it's, like, a cool way to differentiate between them, and I don't have to talk about, like, the support session each time. Just to clarify that, when I'm talking about the serpent, I am... At least I think I am aware of the fact that there are multiple of those. And they're not all, like, called the serpent, I just like the term. Anyway, at some point... we talked about like how multiple, like if you had like a bunch of cans on strings, right? Like just to communicate with each other. And we had like enough of them that you could technically make something complex enough that it might be a consciousness. Just as a theory. And I still believe that assuming that it's not the electricity part that is important for consciousness, that you could theoretically achieve something like that in a system, at least something that seems like it's conscious. That's probably a good way to put it, because it's again, it's really hard to figure out if something is actually conscious or not, or like at least in the sense that we perceive ourselves. Because, for example, I can scientifically prove, and like not me personally, but like I, in the sense that like we as people can scientifically prove that there's something going on in your brain, basically. Right? There are like electrical impulses and stuff that are just zapping around there, and there are like a lot of functions in your body that are working. We can check for that. But we cannot confirm whether or not you're like a person in that sense. Because we're talking about person, I'm just gonna call that person because it's like easier to talk about. Or like if you have like a soul, if you wanna call that. Because there's like no like a physical thing that we can measure. We can just measure that something's going on in there. But we can do the same for example, machines and constructs and stuff, right? Like, if a machine is running, there's also electricity jumping around. Like, we could measure that. We cannot technically measure the difference between, like, those two types of okay, we can kind of make that, but we could technically create a machine that looks like the same, like a human, basically. And we could not prove that said machine has, like, the same kind of consciousness that we humans have. Assuming that we humans even have like the same kind of consciousness, because this is like, again, something we cannot really check. There's like no real experiment that we can do to confirm that. Why am I talking about that? Oh yeah, because they're talking about like existing, like ceasing to exist, and before they're not existing. And like during that time, when I talked about like this experiment with like all of the cans on strings, I thought, okay, assume that there's like some sort of consciousness that we could create doing that. And obviously I said that I don't actually think that the cans are like the best example, because I still believe that the electric part has something to do with it, in a sense. Because otherwise we have to kind of assume that, for example, waves have a consciousness, right? Like just water. Moving water is also very complex, right? There are like a lot of parts bumping into each other. Like if that were complex enough, then it would also get like a consciousness of sorts. And assuming that this is not the case, there has to be something. And I always blame like electricity just because it's easy. Might not be correct. It's just like some starting point to think about these things, because it makes it a lot easier to think about. Anyway. This also kind of poses another question, and I'm really not qualified to like properly debate it. But like, if we have the whole system with like the strings on cans, like at some point we have like something that equals a consciousness. Like we have the same thing when it comes to life. Obviously, life starts at some point, right? Conception and that stuff. Whether you think that that's the part where it starts or like later, not here to argue about that. I'm just saying at some point, consciousness starts. And I have actually a weird story about that, because I, as a kid, had like a point in my time where like memories properly started to form. And the weird thing is, and you might say like, oh yeah, that's just like the first thing that you remember, and like afterwards just like my memory was better. But here's the thing, even as a kid, I did not remember things that happened like just a few months prior. I'm talking like when I was like 3 years old or something like that. There were like some events where I had some friends in my street, and they apparently like, and we always had like this debate that we should have like sleepovers because it's like fun, right? Like we were all friends, and they always insisted that I should, you know, have a sleepover at their place. Again, we're talking about like 3 or 4 year olds, like they would have basically been babysitting, right? And here's the thing, they always insisted on that because apparently they had spent, or like they had that sleepover at my place before. But I didn't remember that, even though it happened like 2 or 3 months before. And I didn't even remember that as a kid. And here's the thing, normally I would just say, okay, look, those were kids, like they were prone to lying to me constantly because they were like embellishing the truth because it was like interesting. I had like those kinds of friends when I was like in kindergarten. My parents also remembered that, but I didn't. Which means to me that at some point between, you know, them telling me that and, you know, those sleepovers happening, at some time between there, my memories started to form properly. Because again, like I, as a kid, didn't even remember that. I just remember, like even when I was like in elementary school, like this is like a constant through line that I have like these memories of me even talking about that to like my friends back then and my family. And I remember how confused I was about the fact that this had happened before. I just could not remember, which means that like my memories started forming like when I was around, I want to say 2 maybe. Obviously I'm losing like loose time frames here, because obviously I did not pay attention to how old I was back then. I barely do that now that I am like in my mid to late 20s. So I definitely did not pay attention to that when I was like in elementary school. In any case, I just wanted to talk about that because I always thought that was fascinating, because now the question is, was I conscious before then? Right? And that's maybe a weird question, but like I was not able to form like proper memories. I knew things that happened there, but I didn't have like visual memories like I have now. Like if I try to remember something, I can remember it like a video basically. Or like I can imagine it, how it happened. But I cannot do that for events that happened before that point, and I couldn't even do that as a kid. And this is why I thought that was like really fascinating. Does that mean I wasn't like a conscious person before that moment? Like at least not in the sense that other people were? I don't know. It's like a really important question in a sense. And obviously, I am not assuming that like every single person had like the same moment in their life. I just have like these weird events that happened like in a time frame that I can remember, while certain other events happened that I cannot remember. And I am weirdly qualified to talk about it because of like these weird coincidences. That's not to say that this is like 100% the truth, because obviously I could be misremembering. Like there's always a thing that sometimes if you're remembering stuff like over the years and years and years, sometimes you might embellish the truth to yourself, basically, right? You're imagining things together. But I am quite sure about this, that I even thought that this was weird when I was a little kid. Anyway, this is why I'm talking about that. Right, which means that even though I started existing like 2 years before then, I didn't properly exist until that point, apparently. Which I think is rather fascinating. At some point you're just going to cease existing again, right? Like there's going to be a point where you will not be able to form memories again because you're sadly dead. And this is definitely something to think about. I've had a massive tangent here. Let's talk about like the other questions. Because yeah, definitely, it makes you wonder why you're here, basically. But I think there's actually something more interesting behind there, because we are also talking about like evolution a lot of the time here. And I think it's fascinating that if we assume that not every single being or like living thing in this world is conscious, because we talked about like, for example, trees and stuff, we all have like a common ancestor to our understanding. I forgot their name again. I actually looked it up after like one of the episodes. Anytime he put something here, there's like, I should also mention this is just a theory. Like, we have not all the connections to properly prove that there was like one common ancestor for every one of us. Or like for every single species on Earth. But there are like enough gaps that it kind of makes sense. Which is why it's like just a theory. Anyway, talking about that, which also means that at some point, if we assume that not every single being has a consciousness, that means that the consciousness evolved at some point on the, I'm gonna call it like animal evolutionary path, if you wanna call it that. Which means that it's like an evolutionary trait that basically being along for the ride of life and processing everything like visually and all that stuff. And having all the synapses fire in your brain to create like this illusion of life, I'm gonna call it, because it's really hard to describe it any other way. That all of that is like an evolutionary trait that just evolved by happenstance and, you know, kept evolving and stayed with us until now. And it seemingly had like an effect, right? Because it allows us to properly process stuff and react to stuff, which, for example, like mushrooms can't really do, like at least not to the extent that we can, right? Anyway, so us experiencing life also is like an evolutionary trait, because it was advantageous, if we have that assumption, because it was advantageous to our survival, it made it more likely for us to reproduce, basically. So yeah. Anyway, why do we exist is basically it, right? Like, we could have also evolved in a way where we didn't have a consciousness. Assuming that, like, my previous statement is true. Because obviously, hard to kind of check. Like, we cannot ask, like, the first common ancestor if they actually experience life the way we do. Sadly, that's not possible. I don't think they understand English. But maybe another language, who knows? Anyway, so yeah, like existence, there are like two different ways to interpret that. Like existence in like the biological form, that they're like slabs of meat running around, and like the existence of our consciousness, I think. And that's both fascinating. What's the purpose of our life? Something? I mean, there's like the biological sense that I always talk about, like reproduce and die, basically. You know, the 4 F's of survival or something like that, that for some reason was called mating in one of the books. Yeah, it's fun. Anyway, the purpose of life. I don't really have a purpose of life unless, you know, I just live, and I'm gonna try to keep living because there's like a part of my brain that tells me I should do that. Should you have one? That's actually a really fascinating question. Like, imagine you were put in charge of the universe as some sort of creator. I always find this fascinating to think about, also about like other topics that are like philosophically interesting. Should there be a purpose to life? And then the next question is, should it be obvious? And I don't know. I would argue no, there shouldn't be a purpose to life, because like if there were a purpose to life, it's basically like... Okay, how do I put it? You know how some people believe that we are in a simulation? Okay, this is maybe another tangent. Which means that there's like some sort of creator of that simulation and that made the simulation for some purpose. Maybe it's just like watching, but maybe we are like in a Sims like game or like simulation and there's just someone sitting around and trying to do something with like all of those characters. Maybe they're just trying to experience like a fun story, or maybe they have like weird, silly goals for each of us. We have no idea, but is that not kinda weird? Like imagine being in this situation, which means like if there's a purpose to life, this is like something set by something or someone. Because I don't think it would be something random if we're talking about like life in general, right? Like again, we have like the whole reproduce and have like offspring and they should also reproduce and all that stuff. Which is also really funny, but I guess this just comes from the fact that this ensures survival, right? Like if every single cell or like single cell and like multi-cell organism tries to have like offspring, like the genetics survive, and the ones that didn't have that drive didn't survive, so they are not here anymore. So like even the idea that the biological purpose of life is like, you know, producing offspring, even that is like an evolutionary trait that just randomly happened because having offspring made it more likely to have your lineage survive and to like produce more offspring, right? It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. Anyway, I'm rambling here. I feel like having a purpose to life, I still think that would be weird. Like if there were like a creator, and especially if they don't tell you, that means that like life is all just a game of sorts. Which, I don't know, I don't like the thought of that. Even if I were put in the position, if I were to set like a goal, then I guess achieving that goal would be a sort of worship of like creator me. I don't know if I like that. It's a lot easier to believe if you believe in like a creator of sorts. Maybe not. I don't know. Do I have one? No. Should you have one? I mean, I don't think you should, but if you think that there is like some goal that you want to achieve, you know, go ahead. I'm not gonna stop you. I feel like this is also... Okay, how do I put it? This is also fascinating because if you're talking about like a goal in life, you're talking about like some special thing that you have to fulfill. But you can also have like smaller goals, and like if you put or like get rid of the of life part in that sentence, then nobody would bat an eye, right? Like everyone has goals. I have goals constantly. Like one of the goals, for example, is finishing this amazing game, right? That's a goal. It's not really the goal of my life, but it certainly is there. So when does a goal that I have become like the purpose of my life? Because it could be everything, right? It's just the accumulation of all my goals, in a sense. Complete as many goals as you can. Have a checklist. I feel like that would stress me out. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Is it better to have a purpose or not? That's another interesting question. I like having a purpose in life. I'm not talking about like a life's ultimate goal, but I like feeling useful in a sense. And that is also a form of purpose. And I feel like most people like that feeling, that people can rely on them in a way, obviously to an extent. But like, for example, I'm not really a teacher of, like my trade isn't like that I am a teacher or something like that, but I have done jobs where I teach people, basically. And I always really enjoy that because I like teaching things that I have learned and giving them to like other people and helping them understand stuff. And this is also a sense of purpose that I have. And it's like, I'm not just doing that as a job. Like the funny thing is, I would probably do like a reduced version of that for no money if money wasn't like a worry for me, like at all. So that's something. Where was I? Better to have a purpose or not? When I approach death, will I feel that my life had meaning? That's a really interesting question. I kind of feel like at this point, I still feel like my life had no meaning in the sense that it was just like random happenstance. I don't really mean that as like a negative thing, but maybe because I'm obviously Like, I hope you can see it. I'm not that close to death yet. I hope that I can think about that, but like not in a negative sense. Maybe I'm gonna be on my deathbed and think of this like as a negative thing, that I haven't achieved like some greater goal. Maybe I will have found like a goal that I can achieve by the time I am hopefully close to 100. I don't know when it's going to happen, but like preferably not in the next few years. So I don't know. So why? If not, why not? What defines whether life was good or not? That's also a good question. This is actually something that not necessarily about the life thing, but I like to talk about this like constantly, because it's something when you're critiquing stuff, for example, that people really have issue with for some reason. And it's like something I constantly debate. I also talk about that on stream and stuff, and like with people I know in real life. And that is, liking something and something being good are like two different things, if you think about it. Because like, I can say I like my life, for example, and you could not really argue against that, because liking something is like purely subjective. But if you talk about like something being good or not in a moral sense, I'm talking about like in a quality sense, you have to make an argument, and things cannot just be good. They have to be good in a certain field. Like, let me make like a really silly example. I know we're talking about life here, but like, I like ice cream. I think ice cream is delicious. I would not say that ice cream is good in totality. Why not? Because, well, I can't use it as mortar, right? But like, ice cream is something great to eat like in the summer when you want something sweet and cold, right? And it fulfills that job. And like, we have like some criteria, like if I want to have like a snack in summer, what would I want to have? And then, you know, kind of have like a checklist, like for example, it should be, you know, refreshing. Then I can look, is ice refreshing? If it is, then it probably fulfills that goal, right? Like, this is an attribute of something being good, as opposed to something that is being liked, right? Like, on the other hand, again, like mortar, I feel like it should stick, and ice cream kind of sticks, but I don't think it does it to the same level that like mortar does, right? And I know this is like a really stupid example, but this is like one that I like to think about, because it's like so silly that I hope it kind of clarifies that something being good or not, at least like again in the quality sense, not in the moral sense, is something you can argue. And now the question is, what defines whether life was good or not? And I would argue it's kind of yourself, which kind of wraps it around to being subjective again in a sense. But you have goals in life, you want to achieve things. I would argue if you achieved the things that you wanted to achieve in life, it was probably a good life. You would even argue that there's a certain percentage of goals that you want to achieve, but you can't achieve in life, and you still have a good life. But the thing is, in that sense, it's probably subjective, because other people can't really define it for you. I would argue, because life, as opposed to many other things, aren't really, like, they don't have a monetary value. Let's put it like that. Right? If I lose like monetary value, like very loosely, can also be very been like in other senses, but there is like an equation for other things that you can kind of make, and at least like loosely make, to figure out if something is good. I don't think you can do that with life, because again, like life is kind of, has like infinite worth in a sense. You cannot really replace it, which makes it a lot harder for like an outsider to really judge it in the same way. I don't know, I feel like I've been rambling on way too much in this episode already. I'm sorry about cutting this short. There's probably lots of stuff that I could be rambling on about, and I will probably do that in my mind for like weeks to come, reading this again. Because obviously every single time I read something I wanna think about in this game, I tend to just be, you know, in that headspace for the next few days till weeks. Anyway, Maxim extract now. What will be moment? Yeah, we had the rest, right? Death is inevitable. You know, time might be infinite, but do you want to be infinite? That's the next question. But I'm gonna leave it here. Where was I? That was actually the end. Oh, that's great, because I'm definitely running long again. Okay, I guess we have been rambling for way too much. Next time, puzzles? How about that? In any case, I hope you enjoyed the episodes and my ramblings, and I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. I'll be seeing you next time. Till then, stop glitching, have a good one, and bye-bye.